You are also the managing editor for Faithwire.com.
Yes.
And you've done some projects with us. We have an upcoming project on Israel, but you are here to talk about a project that you're working on about pornography.
Yeah, we've created a resource now because, this issue isn't going away. And when you look at culture and you see how broken culture is, the number one area that it's broken in is in issues related to sex and sexuality and gender. I mean, we can't even look at people and say, you're a man or a woman. It triggers some sort of reaction and everyone is up in arms about it. And so you have a culture that's gone completely off the rails. And so what we're doing is we've sort of pressed the reset button on that, and we've sort of gone back to ground zero. And how did God design sex? How did God design sexuality? And so where we zeroed in on was porn, because we think porn is the main driver of that dysfunction that we're seeing in culture. And the numbers are more staggering now than ever before. And churches, only 9% of churches have actually resources dedicated to it. So that's why we created setfreecourse.com, so that people can go and so that hopefully churches use it and take a look at it. And really it just presses the reset button on how God designed sex, because sex is a dirty word often in some circles, but and people sort of push that over. But God created it. God designed it for our benefit.
It's really quite amazing. We were watching something, I don't remember what it was, and we were my wife and I were talking about the medieval times. And in medieval times, it was a sign of wealth and beauty if your teeth were rotted, because they had just discovered sugar. So that meant that you were
like full of sugar. You had lots of food.
You had lots of food. They used to use earwax as chapstick. And I said to Tanya,
all addiction to sexuality with that comment.
I said to Tanya, I can't even imagine kissing or being near somebody back then. God was brilliant with the sex drive, because it'd be like, you come in and you'd be like, no, thank you.
Yeah. But how does,
it had to be stronger than it is today.
Yes, I think you're right.
But for those who want to tear that apart and tear that vision apart, where is the lowest hanging fruit? I mean, you talk about that sex drive, we go off the rails with it. What is the lowest hanging fruit to break up the family and screw up,
sex?
It's sex. We're idiot guys. We fall for everything. It doesn't take much for us to go off the rails.
Right. Chapstick. That's all right.
That's all right.
I'm in. Come over here.
So, and the numbers bear this out. I mean, and even among Christians, that's where the shocking thing is. Like culture, it's like everyone's got their bro porn now. I mean, the numbers are, 80% of all people have seen porn, especially from guys. But Christians are not immune to this. And so this study from Barna that came out recently, 65%, 2/3 of Christian men have viewed porn. They view it about at least monthly. They admit to that.
That's an amazing stat.
That's 2/3 of Christian men.
And the porn is not like when I was growing up. There was one kid that had a Playboy magazine.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You had to shame yourself and go into some, concrete, no window building, and your car would be there and be like, oh, there he goes into the porn store. No,
and it's not that way now. Now it is the worst of the worst. Now it's degrading.
Yeah, it's super easy to get at too.
Everywhere, right? Everywhere.
And the real shocking stat, Glenn, is not only is that the case with technology and the prevalence, but among young people, where it's most prevalent, 18 to 24-year-old men. Now the numbers show that they view it as a morally acceptable choice or indifferent to it, a majority. So.
Well, can I tell you something? I mean, you're a guy. You're being told you can't look at women sexually. You can't notice what they're wearing. Rape is completely undefined. Mm-hmm. I mean, I asked you out. You said no. I asked you out a second time, and now
you're a rapist.
Yeah, I'm a rapist. I mean, it's crazy and confusing, and I don't know. As a 20-something boy or a 17-year-old boy, what?
Well, people would argue it's consequence free, right? Like that's just
I don't have. Online, I'm not getting yelled at by anybody. I'm not getting into trouble with anybody. I mean.
It's really
consequence free.
Right? It's not consequence free.
Right? Yeah, not at all. I mean, the pastors that are in this course. You may remember, Glenn. I don't know if you know Doug Wilson, but he got famous because he was debating Christopher Hitchens. He went around and he was the apologist, the Christian apologist that went around with him, and so he lays that all out about how destructive this really is to relationships and how it's the silent killer. Because there's a stigma with pornography. Like if you go into, your church and you do your testimony and there's some sort of, like a drug addiction or something like that, there's a lot of sympathy for you and people, roll out the right card. But there's, if you come up and you're the porn guy,
right? Yeah.
It's like, you don't, how many times have you seen that testimony at your church? How many times have you
never seen it?
Right. And actually the numbers in the study show that even church leaders are falling victim to this. So I know maybe there's a reason why they're not bringing it up. There's a fear that they're going to be found out too.
I know in my church, and my church is the goody two shoes. We drink milk. It's the number one reason families are breaking up. Mm-hmm. It is the number one cause of problem is pornography. Yeah. It starts out as pornography and it just spirals out of control.
I'll say too, if you're having a porn addiction issue, like you're probably not going to want to stand up in front. You're right, because the stigma is big. I think what's interesting about what we've done here is like that the same way that the negatives of what has happened with porn, which is the stigma has been taken away because you can just do it online in your own home.
Right.
Like this course that you have is kind of the same. It takes away the stigma of having to admit it necessarily. You can kind of go through and hear these things without having to stand up in front of your church and tell your neighbors about
Honestly,
it.
I mean, I know
you're ready.
Yeah. I understand the stigma. But it's the same kind of stigma as you would have as an alcoholic 25 years ago.
Yeah.
This is natural, as you said. Yeah. God gave us this sex drive, and it is different between men and women. And men are driven by their eyes. We just are. We're very visual. Women are not as visual as we are when it comes to sex, and so it's normal. It is normal that you would have this drive. What makes us not an animal is trying to say, okay, some of that is good. Too much of this is bad.
Right. Right. And what we're doing is, like I said, we're pressing that reset button and showing you where God has laid this out, because culture's gone so off the rails. And that's part of that's been infused in the church. I mean, even the stuff you let inside, the stuff we allow ourselves to watch. I mean, because you can talk about pornography and say, oh, hardcore pornography. Yes, that's pornography. But what are you watching on Instagram? Which feeds are you looking at? I mean, is Instagram not like the women in bikinis showing their butts feed right now? I mean, like, what does that do to your brain when you're just scrolling that all the way through? I mean, can that be considered porn? I think some people could make that case. You can make a strong case.
This is an argument that my wife and I have all the time. Because there's almost nothing that you can watch on, Netflix or Amazon that, unless it's an old TV series or something, there's almost nothing that you can watch that doesn't have this. So just click, just go ahead and fast forward through some of that crap. And that's the argument is on my wife, like, don't stop watching. We have to stop watching this, honey. Let's just zip ahead of this part, but. Is that right?
Right.
Is that right?
Because it's not, is the course like, does it have recommendations for filters? Is it about that type of thing? What's the approach?
We mention those things because they're good, like having internet filters and accountability partners, and those things are good. But what we do is we really just try to get to the heart of it, because those things are Band-Aids. They're the Bible says our hearts are deceitful above all else. Mm-hmm. So it's, your heart's going to find a way. If you're still desiring that, your heart's going to find a way around your filter. You're going to find another device. You're going to know how to do this and that to get around it. So we try to rewire your heart and show you what God, we give you a positive vision to shoot for. You can't just say, don't do it, don't do it.
Right.
Give me some of the stats.
Well, I'm, 2/3 of all Christian men have viewed porn monthly. They admit that.
I would assume too. If that's the admitted number, it's probably it's probably not higher. Actually just 2/3.
A lot higher. I think it was something like I don't have 1 in 6 church leaders have admitted to struggling with this issue. That's church
1
leaders.
in 6.
And so 9% of churches only 9% of churches actually have resources dedicated to this. And I believe because and this is just me sort of projecting this, guessing this, but because of that and the rampant numbers that are here, I think that there's probably a little bit of fear in some of these leaders because they feel hypocritical, coming out and saying like, let's fight this thing because they know they're struggling it with themselves. But I'll give you one more. Kids are being exposed to porn. I mean, my kids went on Siri the other day and actually said something, and Siri misunderstood it and came back with like a sexual thing. And my son was like, what's that all about? So kids are accidentally or intentionally getting exposed to pornography as young as 10 and 11 years old, and they're getting married later. So now think about that. If you start getting into porn at 10, 11, 12 years old, and it becomes a habit for you, and then you don't get married until you're 28 or 29 years old, you've been poisoning your brain now in how you view women for,
2/3 of your life.
2/3 of your life. And then now we're expecting these people to be a good husband.
And it takes more and more to excite you.
Yes.
I mean, it's
the gateway. It's the gateway.
It is.
You start with porn, and we look at affairs, and that's the other thing that, where does that usually start? That didn't start just one day you wake up and say, I'm going to go have an affair with my secretary. It started in the house, in your phone. And we can talk about this, but I guarantee you our voices right now, we're hitting, the numbers don't lie. The numbers don't lie. We are hitting you. We're not hitting your neighbor. We're not hitting somebody else. I guarantee you there's somebody sitting in their car listening to this, and it's hitting home right now because it's the silent killer, and you've been walking around with that shame and guilt. And so that's why we made this course, setfreecourse.com, because, God wants you to be free from this. He wants you to live, shame-free, guilt-free from this, and he's given you the tools to fight it. And so that's what we point you to.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, he's doing something with his life after this. But
Setfreecourse.com is the place to go get it. And the Israel thing is coming up too. We're going to have the Israel documentary. I was talking to Dan a little bit earlier today about some of the experiences of seeing the media as they cover the Palestinians versus the way they cover the Israelis.
Yeah, that wasn't the goal to go over there, to cover the media. And yet that's what this documentary became, because the media was, if you didn't stay with the gaggle, you actually observed something of the gaggle that they're just never aware of.
Well, and even more shocking, Glenn, is when the gaggle's there, they get the story wrong. I mean, it was unbelievable to me, because we went there to watch Trump, actually do what the other presidents didn't do and open the U.S. embassy there in Jerusalem. And so that's what we were there for. But then what we saw was how the media concocts a narrative that's completely false. And I'll tell you a quick story, for some context. I downloaded an app while I was there called Red Alert. And so you can try this at home and test it and see if I'm full of it. But it's called Red Alert. And what it does is it those annoying alerts you get on your phone when there's like a flood and it's like, really loud. Well, it does that whenever a missile or rocket is launched into Israel, because we wanted to follow, okay, there's rockets falling down here. We're going to go find where they are. And so I downloaded this app, and so it went off a few times while we were there. I get home, and all of a sudden at like 2 a.m, like my phone's just going bananas, and like all day for like 3 days in a row, like on and off, I'm getting these. I had to delete the app because it was so annoying that these rockets were getting shot into Israel all the time. And then so what does the media show? So that's the picture. Like there's the context. Like their rockets are flying in from Gaza all the time. Then the media shows up and is like, look at these Israeli, evil soldiers just gunning down innocent, hapless protesters there on the Gaza border. Why do you think the Israelis are taking it very seriously when they're burning tires? And they're trying to break through the fence. They're taking it seriously because all the rest of the days they're getting rockets shot at them.